Welcome to Conversations. I am Bammy.
And this is KyMichele. We've got a great topic to discuss today, so you guys just sit back, relax, and listen in to our conversation.
Let's go.
And welcome to another episode of Conversations. This is KyMichele.
And this is Bammy.
And today we are going to talk about when the church is skeptical of the church.
Yes, we are going to get into that topic today. I like to look at it as a church exodus over the last, decade, whatnot. We have seen a decline in church attendance, not just the church attendance as in physically going to church on Sundays, but in participating in what we would normally call church activities or even identifying as a Christian. There are obviously several reasons for that. I'm going to name a few here. Technology, I think, is a reason why people don't feel the need to participate or be as active physically in church activities anymore.
Technology as in the fact that you can watch it on YouTube, you can stream the church service, etc., things like that. When you have that, then people don't feel the pressing need to be there in attendance physically. Also, we have generational differences. We talked about this. The older generation had a little bit more enthusiasm and more a different perspective when it comes to attending church and being physically present in church activities, right? Or even identifying as a Christian, because we're not just talking about going to a building. We're talking about also the how you see yourself. And historically speaking, we have seen our grandmothers primarily, because I think most people know that the church is made up primarily of females. So you would have the grandmothers encouraging children, grandchildren to attend church services, to get in their Bible and pray about different things. And so we've kind of lost some of that, I think, over the years.
Yeah. The other one that I identified is culture has encouraged isolationism. The current culture that we live in, I believe, encourages isolationism. For example, and the question that I posed to you earlier was, how many of us know our neighbors, right? How many of us walk in the house, shut the garage door, and that's it? I think that's a culture that we live in.
I don't exactly agree with that.
Okay, that's fine. And good point. We'll talk about that later. But for today, what I think we ought to focus on, which I think is the biggest reason a lot of people do not either identify as Christians anymore or do not attend church and now are skeptical of the church, right, is because of church hurt. That's where I would like for us to focus today. I think there are obviously several reasons why people go through church hurt or deal with church hurt. But yeah, I'd like for us to start there.
Okay. One of the things that I really thought about when we started talking about church hurt was that the reason why that there seems to be an exodus after church hurt is because church hurt usually occurs when a person's trust has been breached. And if your trust has been breached, and especially if there is no healing, when you distrust something, you don't want to be a part of it.
Right.
And so I believe that has spurred the exodus. That church hurt has spurred that, because if you have lost trust in someone, you're really slow to let them back in. Right. And it's the same with church hurt.
Yeah, I look at it just like any other relationship, right? A marital relationship, a parent-child relationship, coach, mentor to mentee type relationship. When the trust is breached there is no incentive to be a participant of that relationship anymore. And I think that's what a lot of people have experienced with the church recently for several different reasons. Sometimes it comes in a form of maybe being abused or financial issues in the church.
Being taken advantage of,
feeling like you're being deceived. One of the things that I've heard from a lot of people who have left the church is they feel like the church is full of hypocrites.
Oh, and I hear it so much.
Yeah, and
I think that's probably number one.
Yeah.
That church people that attend church services that identify as Christians, we're all hypocrites. I hear it all the time. I do.
Yeah, but my comeback whenever anyone says the church is full of hypocrites, and if I want to be smart about it, I say, and then to add one more hypocrite once you walk in, because I feel like to a certain extent this is something that every human being has to deal with to a certain extent. Number one, accept the fact that you can be a hypocrite, right? All of us have the potential to be, but then the goal is to work and strive and grow not to be one or become as less of one as possible. Because guess what? It is very easy for each and every one of us to give advice. But when it's time to do it, it becomes a little bit harder. So that one I struggle with a little bit when people say that.
I mean, I get it to a certain degree, because when you think of someone who professes to follow God and specifically follow Jesus, when you can see his life in the Bible and see that it was above board. Do not come for me, atheists or anybody who do not agree with that statement, please. But you can see Jesus' life, and people say that we do not act the way that Jesus acted. And it's hard for me to even articulate, and as I'm thinking about it, in some respects, it's true. We don't act very Christ-like at times, but people expect for us to be Christ-like all the time, 24/7, without failings, without wavering. And so we, as Christians, we know that we are a work in progress. We know that we are sinners saved by grace. We know that we need to work on these things. And I think when we are not, and when someone sees it that doesn't understand, there's a higher level of scrutiny, and it also just aids to people saying, yeah, see there, I knew all of y'all weren't any good.
Right.
And so we have to be almost above reproach in all aspects in order to kind of skip over that. And so for people to call us hypocrites, I get it to a certain degree, because we say that we are Christ-like, yet many of us are not.
Right. So I think that there is another side to that coin, right? There is an expectation of perfection, but I feel like that expectation is unrealistic.
It is unrealistic. It is unrealistic. However, when you have someone looking from the outside in, and we're on the inside saying it's great to follow Jesus and it's great to be like Jesus, yet we have all of these failings, and unfortunately we have had a lot of public failings. It's hard for anybody to take us serious. And so they don't want their grandma's religion
right.
because it's fake and we're all hypocrites.
Right. And the other thing you'll hear is it's outdated. It worked for them during prior to civil rights, and when there were slaves and they didn't have any voting rights, or they couldn't do this and do that. I've heard some of that as well. And I want to be careful here so it doesn't sound like we are trying to excuse church hurt. I know it's real because I've seen it. I've been hurt in the church.
And so have I.
Right. So, I want to make that very clear that we are not trying to excuse it. I do want us to dive a little bit deeper. And so the next question I would pose to you, Kai, is who is responsible for identifying these hurts in the church? Is it a corporate thing? Is it a corporate responsibility? Is it an individual responsibility? Should it always be brought to light? What does being brought to light mean? That's what I mean. Who's primarily responsible? And then there might be different people responsible for different types of church hurt, right?
I think that's probably where I was thinking, because if we're talking about illegal activity, or if we're talking about something like sexual misconduct, I believe it is the responsibility of the individual who has seen it to report it to whomever it needs to be reported to, authorities, a church leader that is trustworthy. In that sense, yes. But some of the church hurt that I have seen, that's still real. It's still, it's valid. I really don't know who would be responsible for bringing it forward. For instance, somebody being told they need to step down from their position, not for necessarily doing anything wrong, but because there was a difference of opinion. And so now they're unable to carry out their ministry. Something to that, I don't know whose responsibility, because in cases like that, I think sometimes that hurt turns into bitterness. And from that bitterness, when that person is talking to other people about it, it's in such a derogatory way and talking about, the other church leaders and trying to persuade people to leave and, things of that nature because of their hurt. So in that regard, I don't know how to handle that kind of church hurt.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm careful with personally for me in my life is fighting other people's battles. That's something I'm really careful with because in a lot of cases you don't have the full story because you were not there. So I always encourage people to be careful not to fight other people's battles. So in a case that you just brought up with someone being asked to step down because of a difference in opinion, and now they're about bad-mouthing the church to other people, and now other people want to respond based on what they just heard because someone is hurt. Listen, hurt people hurt others, right? It's so easy to go around and say something negative when you've been hurt because you're looking for someone else to feel your hurt, to help you carry some of that hurt. So that's something that I always advise people be careful on. I think in a situation like that, you're looking at what I will say it's an individual responsibility, right? In a situation like that where you are genuinely hurt because, say, for example, you were, say, a children's pastor at a church and the lead pastor asks you to step down because of a difference in opinion. And obviously, you're on staff, you have a salary, your family, your wife, they're relying on that salary. And, now you're talking about financial hurt as well with that. And it becomes real, right? And it's easy at that point to want to start bad mouthing the church, et cetera, on and on. But in that case, I think it's an individual responsibility. That's something that really you need to take to God in prayer, especially being a minister. If you are a minister.
I mean, that I think is very specific. I think that a lot of church hurt doesn't happen necessarily among leadership ranks. And so for you to, talk about salary loss and all of that, I think a lot of the church hurt has to do with people who have decided to use their God-given gifts and talents, and they volunteer their time to carry out ministry at the church, and something happens.
Okay.
I think that's the whole, people on staff. There is a measure of risk, if you will, involved with being on staff. And I say that from, being on staff at a few churches, that it's just a different level of stuff. And a lot of times, if you're on staff and you have been let go, you really don't have a whole lot of places to go, because personally, I think that 9 times out of 10, you have the top governing body or person that has let you go. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
Where do you go from there? It's not like you can go and lodge a complaint with HR.
Right.
So I don't think that necessarily fits in the majority of church hurt. I think church hurt comes from the person who attends a particular body of Christ, and they give of their talent, they give of their tithes, their offerings, they give of their time, and something goes amiss. And I think that's where a lot of it stems. It could be something that was said in a sermon. Sometimes it's something that maybe a more influential family, which there's a problem with me saying an influential family. There's a problem with that in and of itself, but they are there. We all know it. An influential family, says something about another family or another person, or perhaps some members decide to go in together on maybe a business venture or something of that nature. I think they're more rooted in those types of church hurt. And because when when it all came out, if you will, they were on the side of not receiving any support for what they went through.
Well, I mean, that's one of a few examples, right? I mean, there's several other types of church hurt. We've talked about the example of pastors who unfortunately mismanage church money. That's
right.
a big deal. I know that's a huge deal for a lot of people that I talk to who don't want to have anything to do with the church anymore, because they're like, hey, I am. I actually know a couple of people who I used to be associated with, and I say used to just not because we had a fight or anything, but I just don't see them as much anymore. Who said to me, this one guy actually said to me, why do I need to go to church? The church I used to go to, the minister would constantly replace his vehicle. But here I am, a church member. I was paying mortgage and rent for 5 single mothers in the congregation. And so for that, he's just kind of like, I don't feel the need to participate.
So he was helping people out of his own money, but the pastor was not. The pastor was helping himself and not other people in his congregation. That's what you were saying.
Right, but the pastor was helping himself out of church money.
Right.
Not his own salary or anything.
Right.
When his salary is his, that's whatever. But out of church money, church finances, the pastor was helping himself. And here he is, just a regular church member.
Right. We touched on that a little bit in the episode on church and the money. So we know that, finances, and I talked about the person that I know that left the church behind finances. And so, yes, that is a big deal.
So who's responsible, right? Who's responsible for identifying that type of hurt?
I believe that it's something that should be taken to the governing body, like, the elders or the deacons as a whole, and looked at. And hopefully that there will be a resolution in that. Sometimes it isn't. And I think I have shared with you before that I was once a member of a church that there were some issues with the finances, and it was taken before the governing body. The governing body tried to step in and stop some things, but it didn't help. It didn't stop things from going down the wrong path. So it doesn't always work. And I believe in that particular case, I chose to leave, as did others. So and I hate to cut you off there, but here's the difference. You chose to leave, but you didn't lose your faith, right? There are a lot of people who can't deal with it and decide to leave and are leaving the church in droves, I will say, right,
and are losing their faith. Are saying this is not worth it. I'm not interested in dealing with this. I've got enough drama in my own life and my job and within my family. I don't need to be in church where it is not safe. There's going to be drama anywhere you go as long as they're human.
Right.
But again, I think it's important for us to identify who's responsible in identifying these types of hurts, because they are costing the body of Christ in a major way, in addition to all the other reasons why we listed why people are leaving the church, right? Now we just stacked a big old rock on top of all of these reasons, and it's complicating things even more.
I agree. One of the things you and I said in our first podcast, we said that we were going to say this in every podcast, and so here it goes. I did not leave my relationship with God, because my relationship with God was strong enough to withstand not necessarily leaving my faith in Him. I will say I was determined after all of that. I was not going to be a part of any kind of leadership, anything, wherever I was going to be a member. That was my intent. God had something totally different in mind. It did not go that way at all. But I understand the thought of not wanting to be associating with what you came out of, because, I felt as part of the leadership body not being able to stop anything, that, there was a certain level of failure on my part. And I was just like, you know what, if this is the type of stuff that I'm going to have to deal with, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not. I'm going to go to church services. I'm going to do my prayer. I'm going to do my due diligence and, this, that, and the other. But I was determined I was not going to be in that way. And to be quite honest, I think really what pulled me out of that was a very obvious intervention from God. I am not clueless in that I know that he does not operate like that all the time. And sometimes it's more subtle. And sometimes he's silent for a while. And so I believe that saying who is responsible, yes, there needs to be a point where the people who are responsible for doing egregious things especially need to come forward and admit it. What I have come to learn in my life is that 9 times out of 10, people are not willing to admit their faults. They are not. That is far and few in between, even in the body of Christ. It is not an excuse, but it is reality. And so I believe in that case, we need to just really rely on trying to connect with God in instances like that. Because one of the things that I have said before, do not allow your disillusionment with God's people allow you to be disillusioned with God. And I think that's where I was when I went through all of this. There were people who claimed to be his people in a lot of these instances that we hear, but they're not acting like his people when they do it. God is not forcing these people to act in these ways. And so don't let our disillusionment with these people have a disillusionment with God where we just put God to the wayside entirely. I think I'm sure that doesn't answer anything that you just.
No, it does. My concern is that we have a generation of people who are not as grounded in their faith. As a result, did not have that mindset, did not have that outlook. That's where I'm concerned with the effectiveness of the messaging of the church.
I agree with that.
That's the whole concept of the podcast is identifying some issues that make the church ineffective. And church hurt is a major issue. And I think it is on leadership somewhat, but it's also on us individuals to grow in our faith, to know how to respond to church hurt. Let me tell you something.
Well, can I just say, in one of the things that just, anyone, if you see somebody's missing, go see where they are. And I think that's up to the individual, because you said, leadership, but if it's leadership that hurts you, how can leadership look out for you? Well,
I said part leadership and part us individuals, right? That's where the whole idea, the concept of the body of Christ becomes really, really important. It's important that we connect with one another, because guess what? If you're attending a church, even if you call it a mid-sized church of 500 people, if you don't show up, you're not an active participant in something, more than likely no one is going to reach out to you because they don't know you're not there. Even if you are actively a participant in something. And this is where initially I talked about a culture that encourages isolationism. I know a lot of people who go to church and they're kind of like, listen, I just want to go serve my God and go home. Right. And
I think that's a personality thing. I don't think that's a culture of isolationism. We're not going to get into that. I just wanted to say that I believe that's more of a personal preference, a personality trait.
And I 1,000% disagree with you on that. But we can talk about that another time. Right now, we want to focus on this matter. I think now we should consider what it means to find healing from church hurt. For you, what was your healing method, or what did you consider was your process of healing?
Well, I wasn't processing the healing. That was the problem. And like I said, it really and truly was intervention from God in a very obvious way. So, like I said, I can't say that would be the same for everyone. And as a person who is an isolationist,
I think that's why you're struggling with that.
I am, because it's a personality trait.
Okay.
That's just. I'm a bit more. I'm more introverted than you are, and
sure.
So I think that's why it's hard for you to understand that people don't necessarily always want to connect. I believe 9 times out of 10, I think if somebody is getting hurt by something that happened in church, they're a little bit more plugged in. They aren't the ones slipping in through the side door, listening to the sermon, and leaving.
That's fair.
And if people are doing that as a result of church hurt, I would say that prior to them slipping in through the side door and leaving, they were very involved, which was my case. I was a part of leadership. And after I left and went to another church, I decided that I was going to slip in and slip out. I wasn't going to tell anyone about my background, and I was going to go and have my collective worship to God, and I maintained my daily, worship routine. It just so happened that one Sunday I went and talked to the person that gave the message that day and said how much I appreciated it. And out of their mouth, they pretty much read my background. That was nothing but God. I didn't say anything.
What do you say to people who don't have that God moment, right, but are still dealing with church hurt? Because I think there is a very small percentage of people who are going to have that moment.
Absolutely. I agree. That's why I was saying I know that my case is very rare, and I think it's hard. And the fact of the matter is I wasn't looking to be healed is what I wanted to bring up. I was not looking to be healed. I was very comfortable with what I had decided. And I think there are plenty of people out there who have been hurt, who are very comfortable with where they are, and they have no intention of leaving that space.
Do you think that is healthy from a spiritual standpoint?
No, it is not. It is not. I was not in a healthy point at all. I was not at a healthy point. I admit that. I know that. And that is and I wasn't at a healthy point. And I was still willing and saying, but I'm going to serve my God, in this other capacity. So there was a bit of a flawed thinking even on my part. I think one of the ways to heal is to just ask God to get us to a point of forgiveness, because we know that forgiveness is like a cancer, and it hurts us more than it hurts the person or persons or entity that we need to forgive. And clearly, I was not at a point now looking back where I had forgiven the situation. I had not forgiven what had transpired. I hadn't forgiven it. And quite honestly, it was my expectation that I was going to encounter it again and again, because in my mind, this is what happened. This is the way it's going to be. And so I'm going to remove myself from it. And so it was like I accepted that this was the way things were versus forgiving that particular situation. Because I think in our heart of hearts, we all know that not everybody is alike. We know that deep down, but we put up a wall to protect ourselves, and it's easier to believe that everybody is the same. And so that keeps us where we are and in this pseudo comfortable state that we are in. And I say pseudo because there's no real peace in that. Not really. There's no real peace in just removing yourself from a situation instead of doing the hard, very hard work of forgiveness.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good point. My encouragement to people would be to look at it almost with the outlook of any other relationship. You will get hurt, but do you choose to live in the moment of that hurt for the rest of your life? That's the question you need to answer. Or do you choose to say, they're imperfect, they're flawed, they're not Jesus, they're in the process again? That's my outlook. I've had church hurt myself, but what I've been able to do is realize that people and entities they're flawed. And then the other thing is, I don't want people having that standard for me. I think that's the other thing with me is I don't want people having the standard of expectation of perfection and always getting it right and always being buttoned up the right way. I don't want people having that expectation of me, because guess what? I will absolutely let you down. I guarantee it.
Right.
I'm going to do a commercial on it right now. Money back guarantee.
Right. And I think part of that is what we alluded to a little bit earlier, that there is this expectation on the church to be above reproach. But at the same time, we are all sinners saved by grace. We are still going to make mistakes. And unfortunately, in some cases, the mistakes have a little bit more weight to them. So, in cases where it's weightier, sexual sin, for example, oh gosh, one of the things I think that we don't like to talk about in the church is counseling. And sometimes you need to talk to somebody who has the credentials to talk to you about these things and help you sort through these issues, along with, really trying to establish or reestablish your connection with God. And sometimes you need somebody to stand alongside of you and help you down that path.
Yeah, my encouragement to anyone listening to this podcast, to the individual who's been in jail, who feels like, people look down on him when he goes to church, or to the young lady who got pregnant out of wedlock, or to a man who went through divorce, or whatever your situation is where you feel like the church has looked down on you or has hurt you or has not admonished your gifts and talents. My encouragement to you, like KyMichele has said, is to seek forgiveness more than anything else for yourself, for your spiritual well-being. Seek forgiveness. We're all going to deal with church hurt. Like I said, it's like every other relationship. If you're married, you're going to get hurt. If you have kids, you're going to get hurt. If you have parents, you're going to get hurt. So if you look at it a little bit from that perspective, hopefully it helps because perspective helps us understand hopefully should help us understand how to deal with things in different ways. So that's my admonition to anyone, and my encouragement to anyone listening to this particular episode. If you're thinking, how do I heal from church hurt? Healing starts with forgiveness.
Yeah. And like I said, sometimes that means seeking out help from a trusted individual to help you down that path. And, don't give up on God. Don't give up on God. He has not given up on you. Unfortunately, through the ages, things have been done and said in God's name, and he did not sanction it. We see this in the history books. So if you have experienced church hurt, I would say really try to connect with God. Really try and get to a place where you can commune with him and let him help you through this. But it really does start with the quest to forgiveness. When we have bitterness in our hearts, when we allow anger to take over, it's really, really hard to hear from God, because the enemy loves to play in that field, and he will whisper things to us. He will cause things to come to our mind and will just reinforce what we're already feeling. And he wants us to stay there. And so my, thing would, please try and go through the path of forgiveness and connecting with God. It's the people. It's not God.
Yeah, and last point on that, I want to say this to every believer. You are a part of this. I think when we talked about whose responsibility it is each and every one of us is responsibility to look out for church hurt, for people who've been hurt by the church, and actively seek to help them heal. Every single one of us.
That we're supposed to bear one another's burdens. So
Absolutely.
Just as simple as, if you see somebody's missing, find them. A lot of people can easily be found if you don't have their phone number through social media.
Yeah.
Find them. Check up on them.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear some feedback from you all. Know what kind of church hurt you've experienced. If you have healed from that church hurt, how you healed. We'd like to know how you dealt with that. So share with us on all our social media platforms.
Yes, you can get in touch with us at 46Conversations. That's our website, 46conversations.com. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, 46Conversations. You can share this podcast with someone maybe that has gone through church hurt or needs to hear any of our previous podcasts. We can be found through Apple Podcasts. Put in 46Conversations with Bammy and KyMichele. We can be found on various other platforms, and we're also on YouTube. And so there are the places that people can reach out to us.
Yep. Thank you for joining us again. We'll have another episode out next Wednesday. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. So we are out.
See you next time.